going to start the video by giving a brief history of the company NPO SM. They started off in the Soviet Union as a research and development facility owned by the government because communism. They're the ones who made the Kolpak 1 and Kolpak 2 riot helmets for the MVD Oman. You will know this or you will know that helmet if you play games like Tarkov and other day shit like that. After the fall of the Soviet Union, it's when they actually became the company that we know today, NPO Special Materials. They also produced vests during the Soviet Union, but a lot of them came after the fall when they were known as NPO SM. They made a lot of things for the Russian MVD and the riot police, eventually producing actual ballistic helmets for them in the late 90s and early 2000s. I don't know too much about their products, if any, that they made during the 2010s. I also don't really give a shit, to be 100% honest. The things that I'm most interested in is their modern production, such as the stuff we're going over today. Whenever the full-scale invasion, or as the Russians call it, the special military operation, happened, they started to produce a bunch of helmets for the Russian military as a stopgap for shortages. They're generally quite low quality or shitty. Not all of them, but they do have some quality control issues, and it's really made for mobilized troops or conscripts or other low priority troops. So I'm going to get into the actual meat and taters of the video today, starting off with probably the most infamous helmet, the Kolpak 20, which has a BR2 GOST rating, which is equivalent to NIJ 3A if you're from the United States. If you're not, then look up the conversions or whatever. This isn't one-to-one because they don't translate directly one-to-one, but like the NIJ equivalent would be 3A. And I have a script, so I'm going to read off the script. So if I sound retarded, that's why. The Kolpak 20 is one of the more infamous examples. I already said that. It's a Russian stopgap during the invasion. Around mid-2022, the Russian military realized they need a lot more helmets than they had for mobilized or low-priority units, so they had NPO SM start mass-producing modernized steel helmets. Contrary to what is commonly said, these are not SSH-68 helmets from the Cold War era, but rather SSH-40 helmets from World War II. A quick editor's note here. I forgot about the existence of the SSH-60, so this very well could easily be SSH-60 helmets to some degree, because they are almost identical to SSH-40 helmets. But the official NPO SM documentation does say that they are SSH-40 helmets. I believe there actually might be a few helmets that are made with newer steel helmets like the 68, but I've seen some photos of it, but I don't know for sure, and I cannot find them, so I'm not going to say that for certain, but that could be real. But 99% of them are SSH-40 shells, and they add a aramid or Kevlar lining or a ultra highway molecular polyethylene, which is it's like what milk jugs are made out of. And if you didn't know that, yeah, that's actually really good at stopping bullets, apparently. Uh, Obviously, it's not the exact same chemical formulation that's used in milk jugs, but it's the same kind of plastic. And they add a lining of that to increase the protection, I suppose. And they add a modern suspension system with, chin strap and better pads instead of their, like, the Cold War era or World War II era leather shit. Okay, another quick editor's note. I have found that there are a bunch of replicas that only have one strap that goes directly to the chin instead of the one that has the nape strap, as shown here. And these are either replicas or maybe a difference in a civilian versus military model. I'm not entirely for sure, but these at least are not actually issued to any Russians. to my knowledge. These are all just civilian stuff, so either replicas or a civilian model for the civilian market. I have seen Kolpak 20Ms listed, but I actually don't know what the difference is between the 20 and the 20M. The manufacturer states that they have a different suspension system, but I don't like have an example. I don't like have one of these helmets, so I don't actually know if that's the case. Because as you will see later in this video, NPO SM is not exactly good at documenting their products, at least not from what I can see. Maybe I'm fucking retarded and I don't know how to research, but a lot of the shit they say is like contradictory. Moving on to the Kolpak 100, this is a Kevlar helmet. It has a BR1 GOST rating, which is equivalent to NIJ Class 2, which is actually lower than the fucking Kolpak 20. These ones are almost as infamous as the previously mentioned Kolpak 20, as they're clones of or based off the American Pasget helmets. More specifically, I believe, based off the police models, such as the United Shield PST. The reason I say this is that the sections that cover the ears protrude down far less than on the original Pasget shells from the 80s. They come from the factory in a carrying bag with an EMR helmet cover on them, but these ones are not bolted to the helmet like some of their other models, so it can be removed. It's interesting that a lot of footage in Ukraine shows the soldiers wearing them without the helmet cover, so it's not exactly clear if they lost the cover or weren't ever issued with it to begin with. My assumption is that maybe the factory started sending helmets off without the covers as a cost and time-saving measure to fill gaps in gear stockpiles. This is not confirmed at all, and just me speculating though. Moving on to the Kolpak 103, which has the same GOST BR1 rating or NIJ Class 2. The Kolpak 103 is a ECH/MICH 2000 base shell design. It has two models from what I can tell, one that has no arc style rails and one that does. And I believe the one with rails has the EMR cover permanently attached to the helmet as its bolts seem to go directly through the helmet cover. And in this video you can see what I mean. Moving on to the most AIDS part of the video. This is going to be the biggest section because it is the most annoying part. The Kolpak 102. It is the same exact rating as the previous two, BR1, which is equivalent to NIJ Class 2. I saved this one for last because this helmet is very, very confusing. I initially thought that the Kolpak 102 was an ECH clone like the 103, but a railless model, but this does not appear to be the case, as there are various quotes from NPO SM stating that the helmet is the same as the Kolpak 100 but with a new cover and suspension system. This graphic here shows this. The issue I find with that is that I can't notice a perceivable difference between this helmet cover, between this helmet's cover and the 100s, and same with the suspension. I started to think that maybe the 102 was an evolution of the 100 and replaced it in production, but both helmets are being produced still. At some point I started thinking maybe the Kolpak 100 is the model that comes without the helmet cover, but that doesn't really make much sense to me for them to label it as a totally separate model just for the helmet cover. Looking online for listings of it for sale doesn't help at all either, because most of the sites are schizophrenic, labeling Kolpak 100s as Kolpak 20s, as I mentioned earlier, and listing the 103 as a 102. Said this earlier, something that supports the idea of them being an evolution of the 100 is that a lot of Russian formations have Kolpak 102s listed in their inventory instead of the 100, at least from the ones that I found, such as this specific report that lists a 102 in its inventory during its 24-hour reporting period, has 3 helmets, 3 vests, and 3 rifles listed as lost. Those being 1x 6B47 helmets, 1x 6B45 vests, 1x AK-12 rifles, 2x Kolpak 102 helmets, 2x Picket armored vests, and 2x AK-74M rifles, and 500 rounds of ammunition. Them being listed as lost does not inherently mean killed in action or missing in action, so like captured, but the fact that they are essentially 3 combat loadouts implies that they were either killed or captured by Ukrainians. The Kolpak 102 had 2 of the KIs wearing them, with the Picket armor, sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble reading this because I'm retarded. Essentially, the Kolpak was more common to see on troops, and I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here about this, because a lot of like Russian supporters go really, really, really hard about this. Um, but the modern Kolpak helmet lineup is mass-produced and low quality, targeted towards Mobiks or like conscripts or low-priority people who are meant to die, cannon fodder. I say this because of the picket vest being there. Uh, the Picket Group is a company that was contracted to produce 30,000 vests for the Russian military, but they weren't actually capable of making this many. So they got 30,000 textile covers, which are basically it's just the Russian way of saying plate carrier because of the like weird translation, like direct translations and such. Um, they bought 30,000 plate carriers from Chinese factories, so very shitty plate carriers, and then bought 60,000 steel armored plates so they can put in, the front and the back part of the vest, and then sold them to the Russian military as if they produced them themselves. This became sort of somewhat of a large scandal. As for those who don't know, steel armor is very dangerous because when an armor-piercing round hits steel, it will be stopped by the armor, but the steel that's inside the bullet, which is the part of the bullet that's armor-piercing, basically just explodes into a bunch of shards that oftentimes kills the wearer as the plate directs the shards of the bullet up into their neck, which is bad. For them to even be remotely safe, they need a Kevlar liner and a rubber coating to catch the shards, also called spalling. That's what the shards are called. Uh, but these picket type vests from the picket group did not have those. And even with these coatings and liners, they don't stop 100% of the spalling. And they can still result in the users being killed because a lot of the spalling will still escape. Vests like the modular Cocoon made by NPO SM, commonly issued with the Kolpak 20, also uses steel plates, and I believe it does come with a lining either in the vest or around the plate. But like I said, that still can result in you being killed or heavily wounded because Spawn can get out, and they also never are issued with trauma pads, which are essentially these pads that you put behind the plate, which is meant to dampen the impact of the bullet on the steel plate. Uh, if you've ever used a metal baseball bat or any sort of piece of metal and hit something really hard, this steel transfers the energy into your hand really easily, and it hurts pretty bad when you do that. A lot of times it makes you drop whatever you're holding. Now imagine that, but with an armor-piercing bullet going over 2,800 feet per second, hitting your vest. The energy from that alone is something like the force of a sledgehammer hitting you in the chest. And this itself can actually be fatal. That's not even touching on how steel will get heavily dented, which is essentially just blunt force trauma, which will also be like a sledgehammer hitting you and can rupture your lungs and other things and can kill you. It's called backface deformation. That's what the trauma pad helps with, and even then, you can still kill you because it'll deform like 12 inches, which is like, or not 12, sorry, like 3 or 4 inches. Imagine something pushing 3 or 4 inches into your chest, and you're gonna die. That fails a lot of like certifications too. That's why steel plates are not used anymore because they're retarded. Anyway, so with my anti-steel plate tangent aside, let's get back to the Kolpak 102. From the evidence I can find, my theory is that the 102 began as an evolution of the 100. What the fuck am I reading? I'm retarded. I don't know how to write a script. Jesus. From the evidence I can find, my theory about the 102 being an evolution of the 100 has another hole poked in it by the previously mentioned fact that both the 102 and 100 are still produced. And they're basically sold at the same price. Maybe a few, like maybe like 20 or 30 ruble difference between the two. So my best guess is that the 102 is an updated version of the 100, as the 102 started production months after the 100 started. So it's a newer helmet. Either that, or that a lot of sources online mislabel it. And official quotes from NPO SM are either lost in translation or taken out of context by retards. And that the 102 is actually an ECH or Mitch clone without the rails, and the 103 is the model with the rails, or vice versa. Essentially saying that the 100 that the 102 is not a Pasget shell clone like the 100, but is actually a ECH or Mitch model. And it's related to the 103 rather than the 100, and they misquoted in POSM. I'm not 100% sure which it is because Russians are pretty fucking stupid and they contradict themselves like nonstop. If you look into this yourself, it's very frustrating. Maybe that's because I don't speak, I'm not like fluent in Russian or anything like that. And so perhaps it's like some sort of lost like translation, like lost in translation thing. But I don't think that's the case because uh, it's pretty consistent across everything that there's a lot of mislabeling and a lot of just confusing shit that doesn't make sense. And it's not as confusing with the Kolpak accent lineup. And the reason I'm not mentioning them in depth in this video is because I'm specifically talking about the like low quality gear for like conscripts and shit. Because the accent lineup, from what I can tell, is actually a decent helmet. I don't know how many they make, but it's meant for more valuable troops, like troops that Russia does not want to just instantly die. I mean, they not like they care too much about any other troops, but the people who get better equipment, right? Uh, those are way less confusing, and the documentation for them is significantly better. And so I think that they just don't really care to have good documentation for helmets that are basically designed to be lost in combat because they don't expect their wearers to survive for very long. So they don't see an issue or a reason to have good documentation. That's what I'm thinking. So it makes it very difficult for any amount of research. Um, I will make a follow up on this video probably whenever I do learn anything more, or if there's any comments. So that's pretty much all I have to say about all this stuff. If you do know anything that I don't, or if I have said something incorrect, and you actually have proof that I'm incorrect, it's not just like, actually, like if there actually is something like you have a better source or a correction to make, please do make a comment because I do want to learn more about this because it's very interesting to me. If you liked this, let me know. I will try to make more videos. I'm particularly interested in doing the same sort of breakdown, but for NPO SM's vests that they issue. Anyways, I appreciate any sort of comments or ratings on the video. Greatly appreciate those. Um, Thank you for watching, and that's about it.